Welcome, everybody. This is Doug McCall, coordinator of the Global Network of Deans of Education. Pleased to be welcoming you to this session on rebuilding, renewing, and transforming school systems. And I'm pleased to be welcoming our panel, which will be making a series of remarks prior to opening it up to a pretty roundtable style discussion of the issue of changing school systems and school and other systems. So our session is described in the slide in front of you. It's the session description that's been circulated. We're going to use the joint statement that's been developed by a number of educator organizations as a backdrop to the remarks made by our panel. And then we'll have an open discussion of school system change, school and other system change as a way of starting our conversation. I'm really pleased to note that this is the first time, in at least my knowledge, that a number of educator organizations have got together like this to prepare remarks and a statement for at the global level. So I'm really pleased. We'll begin our session with Irma Eloff, who is chair of the Global Network of Deans of Education and a professor at the University of Pretoria. We have, and also with affiliation to the University of Innsbruck. We have Amy Nilloms from ASCD, who'll be focusing on the whole child. Kevin Cardell, who is president of the Canadian Association of School System Administrators, will talk about working with and within cultures and context. Peter Kent, president of the International Confederation of Principals, talking about resilience and realities. Ann Levitt, director of leadership programs at the American School Superintendents Association on systems change. And then once we open it up, I'm going to ask other members of the group of educators to comment as well based on the conversations we've had in developing the statement. So Irma, I'm going to pass it over to you, and thanks for participating.
Thank you very much, Doug. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. This is the joy of a conversation such as this one, is that it literally spans the globe. You know, we live in a world where we all know that really good things happen when people start talking to one another. And when we sit down, get in the same room, whether it's an in-person room or a virtual room like we did with this current process, the collective wisdom of everyone in the room serves the purpose of finding more innovative solutions to the challenges that we face as humanity. I was trying to think about when this process started, and I think Doug can probably confirm or deny this, but I think it's more or less 2 years that we've had these ongoing conversations about renewing, rebuilding, and transforming education, schooling systems, and education systems around the world. It is something that is close to our hearts for all of us in the room here, and also for everyone who has been part of this process. We ask ourselves in education a lot about the way forward and about futures of education. But in those conversations, we often neglect to really get to the grassroots level and engage with the practitioners who are on the ground every day working in education. And this is something that I think we have achieved with this ongoing process, which is not static, it's very much a dynamic process, is to get to the representatives and the practitioners themselves. There are several things that's quite different to this process in my mind. The first thing is, from the start, the processes and the discussions extended well beyond national borders of education. Often when we talk about education, we only talk about what's relevant in our own country or in our own national context. And from the start, the discussions were lively and it was global in nature. That was, for me, one of the first things that stood out. A second thing that stood out is that I think it extended way beyond ministries of education in terms of its relevance at the moment, but then also going into the future, because we need various ministries, not only education ministries, to be a part of this discussion.
Next slide, and welcome Amy to make her remarks.
Greetings, everyone. I bring you greetings from ASCD plus ITSE because we have merged, and we believe that the transformation of education requires us to prioritize the needs of the whole child. This involves acknowledging that the way we were taught in the past is no longer effective. The joint statement highlights the importance of schools collaborating with other sectors to address the needs of every child, particularly those who are marginalized. This means providing coordinated support services and essential physical resources to ensure that they are healthy, safe, engaged, supported, and challenged. Our whole child framework, which also focuses on the whole child as well as the whole educator, because again, the educators have to be whole if they are going to be able to actually teach our children. So we look at our tenets as well as the anchors that go around our tenets, that foster that relationship building, as well as the additional supports that the educators will be able to help provide to our students.
Peter, can you take us into resilience and realities, please?
Yeah, sure, Doug. Good to be with you, everybody. I'm from the International Confederation of Principals, and it's an organization that's got very broad membership across 5 different continents. And sometimes people say to me, "Oh, you must notice the difference between different systems, different parts of the world." Well, actually, what often strikes me is not the differences. I'm much more struck by the similarities. And 2 particular similarities I want to highlight for a moment or two. The first is the similarities in the impact of the pandemic and the lockdown and the interruption to schooling has had upon young people across the world. And that this has had an impact upon their social and emotional development. It relates to what Amy and Ken have already been talking about in terms of the whole child. I think to some extent, we've yet to fully understand the impact of that COVID lockdown and everything that it did. Perhaps we will only fully understand it over a series of years. It's like there's a series of earth tremors that have gone out that we're only beginning to fully recover from. But a particular thing I wanted to highlight is the impact that this has had upon those who care for the whole child, those involved in the professional caring roles, whether it's teachers, leaders, counselors, psychologists, nurses, support staff, and many others working within school contexts. And that it's really had a profound impact, I suppose, upon the channels of qualified, high-quality professionals. Certainly in the area I particularly work closely with, which involves hearing from across the world about people's experience of working with teachers and particularly with school leaders. There's a number of our colleagues across Europe and Africa and the Americas and Australasia and so on who are saying, look, there's a real shortage of, for example, teachers who want to come into the profession, but also a real shortage of school leaders. And it's gone in a couple of directions. It's both experienced colleagues who've been in the system for some time, who COVID and the pandemic and the lockdown gave them an opportunity to reflect. And they've come back and they've said, you know what, if this is the job and what it involves, I'm not sure I want to go on with it. And it's also those who might be taking the next steps, whereas it's stepping into teaching or into these other roles or stepping into school leadership, who are saying, well, I've seen the effect it has upon others, and I'm not sure I really want to take this on myself. So there is a real challenge and a real need for distributed leadership, for long-term development programs, for ways to support those who are going to work alongside young people, those who are going to provide that whole child education, so that the continuing supply of high-quality colleagues going into these caring professional roles in schools is not disrupted. It's not something that can be.
I'll turn to Anne from the American Association of School Administrators, and Anne's going to talk about ASA did a really good job a couple of years ago on doing a commission on education. If you wanted to read a really good report, go to their website and find it, because it does provide the process, as we refer to the statement, talk about different processes and understanding how significant the process needs to be, must be, if it's to be successful to reform systems. So Anne, if you could take it into your remarks, and then we'll turn to others. I see there are others from our group that have joined us, but Anne, please.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Doug. I appreciate the opportunity. It's my honor and pleasure to speak with you and our colleagues this morning. We're all involved in the same work. And we represent more than 10,000 school system leaders across the United States and its territories. And I'm pleased to serve as the Assistant Executive Director of the Learning Network, which is primarily the professional development arm of the American School Superintendents Association. Dave Schuler is our Executive Director, and Dave and I were very fortunate to be a part of that emerging work you referenced, the Commission's report, which was issued right at the height of the pandemic. And at that time, we took the opportunity to really bring together organizations and leaders in education to identify very much what we're talking about today, those critical pieces that are needed for school district reform. We're looking, of course, at culture, where the whole learner is recognized and there's a focus on the whole learner. No learner is marginalized, and the work is primarily future driven. We're looking, of course, at social, emotional, and cognitive growth, as well as marshaling the resources that we know are necessary for children to grow and develop. And clearly, our focus at that time was also, how do we transform districts so that we are better prepared for the future?
Gracia from the International School Nurses Association, and Martin from Education International, and Carolyn from ASCD/ISTE has also joined us. So Gracia from the International School Nurses Association, would you want to comment about the statement and about the role that caring professionals such as school nurses play in school systems and working with students?
Hello,
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
I want to speak a moment.
Yes, please.
You can see me?
Yes.
Sorry for my bad English, but I want to speak a lot about the necessary the representation of nurse in the education of the school. I read the documents, and I think that is important, the mention of the work, the role of nursing in the assistance of the class, in the assistance of the community of the school, but it's necessary the paper of the nurse about the education of the health in the school, because it's necessary to prepare to the children for the health in the future, in general. And for this situation, it's important to work about the class.
The group has been very active in helping us develop the statement.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. I think it's really important work and a very important coalition that you've pulled together here. And I appreciate the way that you've platformed off the Transforming Education Summit. We're also at a situation sort of mid-SDG cycle where we should be looking and thinking about the way we might influence the next round of indicators that are going to be developed by UNESCO. And I do think it's an appropriate audience for this work. I think that in terms of how we respond to education now, as some of you know, I also do quite a lot of work with OECD. This is an issue that comes up regularly and often with them. And I think they've worked quite hard to fill out their vision of the child into one that's more holistic, but there is further that they need to go. And I think UNESCO are aware of the importance of a whole child approach. And I think you, Doug, are aware, as is the group, of the importance of a whole school approach. So unless we line up the whole child with the whole school, with the whole teacher, and do this within a context of well-being, we're going to miss the boat. And I think you've been quite clear about the importance of well-being and the symbiotic relationship between teacher and student. But the teacher doesn't exist in isolation either. And that's why this coalition is so important, because you've been able to position the teacher, the school counselors, the teacher educators, and everybody who's operating around that school system in a way which gives us responsibility and a part to play. I think that you've created an environment that is accessible and workable for both child and adult in this situation. And I think it's important that we remember that as society becomes more and more pressured, and we end up in a situation where we have a world that is at the current time quite sick, that in order to make it well, we need to have a change of emphasis and a change of focus. And I think this statement provides an opportunity to do that. So we've
appreciated communities, but I do want to pick up on Martin's comment about whole school, whole child, and whole community. And Kevin, you hopefully we can talk about that in terms of linking up to the whole community. And then I would add another one that came out of the Transforming Education Summit, which is whole government. Often UN agencies don't want to talk too much about their governments because they're the members of those agencies, and they don't want to put their members in hot water. But the whole government, and that was the theme that came out of the Transforming Education Summit, is the need to have a whole of government approach to the whole child, and that would strengthen the systems response, systems plural to the response. But Kevin, please add to our discussion by making your remarks on connecting to the community, and then we'll go back to the speakers list. Kevin?
Yeah, thank you. My apologies for the mix-up. From my perspective, if we're going to support the development of young people who are going to have the capacity through critical and creative thinking to really make changes in how we respond to living with our world and the environment, then they need to be well. I mean, that's one of those key pieces. And to be well, schools can't do it all. We have to work within community all the time. This is an Indigenous notion, and certainly in Canada and British Columbia, that you work in community with all the leaders and partners to support the growth of the child. And so that's really important. And the way we look at it is we have something, kids can't learn unless they're ready to learn. And that ready to learn piece means they have to see themselves and their culture as valued in the community. So there's a lot of work that has to be done around making sure that they have a dignity of person and that they can see their worth. So you have to work on things, at least in our communities, on anti-racism. You have to work on things supporting students with the community to do that, because that's not something that even allies can necessarily do on their own. You have to bring in the community to support that work, to truly understand the experience of young people in your community, and how do we avoid othering them. We have to work with our Indigenous communities. We have local education agreements. We work with them, with each child in the work that they need to do. We make sure that their culture and story is present in our schools, and the history, and is visible, their artwork. And so that helps connect to the community. But again, you need the community to work with you and come into the schools so that those young people see leaders who are them, who look like them, who are part of their culture, community, and family in the schools and represented in the work that we do.
In the middle of British Columbia. Caroline, I'm going to ask you to make a couple of comments, and then Caroline from Save the Children, and then Chris, if you wanted to jump in as well. And then after the initial remarks, I'd like to turn to where do we go from here with the statement. I do have a couple of slides on that I'd like to open up for discussion. But Carolyn from ISTE/ASCD, do you want to tell us a little bit about how technology can be a vehicle for change?
Great. Thanks so much, Doug, and to everyone. I'm Carolyn Sikora. I'm the Senior Director of the ISTE Standards Programs. And ISTE is the International Society for Technology and Education. And as Amy mentioned, our organization merged at the beginning of 2023. And I think it's a testament to how whole child and curriculum and technology can work together to achieve these same aims. I want to say thank you for the thought leadership that went into this joint statement. Certainly, great remarks about well-being, culturally responsive, inclusive. Whole child is so important. Coming out of the COVID, where there was so much isolation, it exacerbated some of the mental health, well-being issues, and for children and adults. And I think this work is so important. One of the comments, Kevin, thank you, that you mentioned was student agency. And in my work, I work with leaders in primary and secondary school, educators, and in teacher preparation programs. And student agency is so vital in such a way because it provides that choice, that decision making, taking responsibility, self-direction, and those are things that are learned, started early, but really mature over their students' academic careers. And with technology, when I think about technology for learning, which is very different than the technology that many kids come in today with experience using technology for social or other things, but not necessarily for learning, and educators learning using technology for teaching and learning, is that we can build student agency. There is a world at our fingertips in a way that was not the case less than a generation ago. And how can we capitalize and build student skills, student agency, so that post-secondary they can learn at any time, anywhere, with anyone, in a world that is really changing so rapidly. So it is really our mission to equip students while they're with us in primary and secondary school, to build those skills that enable them to pursue their interests, measure their progress, collaborate with people that on interesting projects. And I would argue too that as the world of work changes, as so many institutions change, knowing government or finance or entrepreneurship, by teaching students to be curious, to be creative, to be collaborative, they can draw on those skills that we build with them to really serve themselves over their lifetime.
Just briefly, the slide that is on the screen now is the kinds of things we're planning. And Martin's offered to pick up on one part of that in terms of the OECD connection. That's great. If people have those opportunities in their own work, if they wanted to just contact me to see how we can do that. And it was great. This is a shared leadership model. Please feel free to jump in and take a lead on some event, some conference, some project or something where you think we could use the statement to influence the discussion, and then publicize the statement as a backdrop to that particular project or initiative. I think that's the value of the statement, is that it's a fairly coherent set of ideas, practical ideas that need to be pursued one by one, step by step. they add up to a big ideas, but they're all need to be step-by-step incremental change. So anytime any member of the group has an opportunity to bring the statement into the conversation with decision makers or with practitioners or with researchers, please do so.
Thanks to you, Doug, and to Irma for your work on this. It's much appreciated.
Yeah, no, it's enjoyable work. I know Irma's, I don't know what time of night it is for Irma, but she's a very dedicated person to work with. That's great. Further comments before we finish up? If not, I'm going to just turn off the